At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soulblazer.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Super NES Podcast, episode number 268. These are your hosts, Greg and Joe.
Hello.
And we are covering a game that I never heard of, which I know that Joe never heard of either. There's a whole bunch of really obscure titles. Which happens with a system with a library as large as Super NES. Not every game could be a winner, and there's a lot of games do get ignored for one reason or another. That doesn't mean it's a bad game necessarily. It just means that for whatever reasons, the game never got any notice. And the game we're covering today definitely would get a game that fits in this category. Yeah. Whether or not it's a good game or a bad game or somewhere between is what we're going to hash out for most of this podcast. But I think I saw this. I know I picked this game, Joe. But at this point, I don't remember how I heard about this game, because we're covering a game called Warlock, which is actually based upon a movie of the same name. I never heard of the movie or saw the movie either, so I'm not sure exactly how they got to my attention.
So I've never seen Warlock, and this game is actually based on the sequel, Warlock Armageddon. So it's even more curious.
Yeah. It's very confusing with this game's lineage, which we'll get here to in a moment. So, I don't think it. I don't think it was on our bad game list, because you're the one who did most of the work on that. So, right. I must have seen this. I might have seen this on a list of overlooked games on the system, because spoiler, there are some people who think very highly of this game. So it's very possible somebody came up with a list at some point that had this game on it, and I thought, I never heard of this game. Let's check it out. So That's my best guess at this point. Warlock, like I said before, as just mentioned, is a video game based upon a movie. Actually, based upon movies in this case, because Joe mentioned it is kind of confusing about all this. I'm not really a horror fan, so I really didn't have any interest to watch the movie or movies directly. I just skimmed the first movie kind of real quickly, to kind of, since it is available for a major subscription service, the service that I belong to, so it was easy access. Try to get the gist of it, and that they decided with this video game, however, that while they used as Joe alluded to, while they used elements of gameplay, while they used elements from the first movie to help develop the gameplay, a lot of the game, such as the plot, the plot and druids and runestones, actually come from the sequel for this movie. Well, the first sequel, it was actually was a third movie, believe it or not, Joe. There were 3 Warlock movies all together. So the third one was not out yet. It was out yet until this game was made. So even though it's named after the first movie, and even though it uses, I'm not sure if you noticed this, Joe, I forgot to point it out to you beforehand. Even though the game uses, the artwork from the second movie, right. It takes the name implies the first movie to make it even more confusing. Right. So it definitely is a kind of a cluster mess here as to what was going on. But yeah, so if you look at the, if you look at the poster for the sequel, the first sequel, Warlock Armageddon, that's the artwork like this game, basically. So,
okay.
The hand reading the magic and whatnot, because right. it's a core. I see why it's a core graphic than the poster for the first movie, which is just like a man standing there with like a shadow behind him. So, definitely more game appropriate, but. since I'm sure people probably have never heard of the movie either. I'll talk about the movie here just for a little bit. 1989 movie. So again, the confusion also kind of goes here to some of the movie. It was an American-made movie, but they used like British actors for like a lot of the cast. And it was released internationally in 1989. However, the studio, which had the rights to release the movie in the U.S., at the time, which was a I had it here in a moment. I had it here a sec. Oh, here we go. New World Pictures was basically in the process of going bankrupt at that time, so they couldn't. They didn't have the money or resources to release the film, and therefore shelved for 2 years. It finally got picked up by Trimark and was given finally a limited release in the U.S. On the big screen, in 1991. Despite that, the movie actually turned a profit for them. So, that's the end that worked out, and because of that, that's what sparked, the 2 sequels. Yeah. So, the plot of the movie's basic horror / supernatural stuff you've seen before in the past. To stop me for this plot before. Boston, Massachusetts, witch trial, 17th century, Warlock, bad person, Clara trying to stop them, yada, yada, yada. We've seen this song and dance before with other stuff in the past, so not really anything original. The movie seemed alright. Reviews for the movie are not great. It's kind of like mixed reviews, but there are people that enjoy it, like what it is. It was actually compared. It was actually compared a lot when it came with when it came out to Terminator, as far as the actual plot line here and some of the story elements, which I never thought of watching this, but thinking back on it now, I'm like, yeah, I can kind of see. Yeah. I can see that some of the stuff here for sure. So, I'm guessing you did not take the time to watch this fully, Joe. So.
I did not. I knew Julian Sands was in this, and this was this was his claim to fame, was this franchise, which, by the way, he only did the first 2 movies. Correct. He opted out of the third because the first 2 were so bad. So that tells you how much confidence he had in his own career and this franchise.
Yeah, exactly. So, so it's a very curious title to turn to a game, however, because it's because I said the movie was a modest success. The success when it was a success in the U.S. when it came out, sure, but it only got mixed reviews. So I really don't know. I guess that if I told you published the game, maybe that might kind of give a hint. You hinted the reason for it. Acclaim / LGN got the rights to publish the movie as a game. So it's like, I'm guessing they're kind of bargain hunting, looking for anything that they get their hands on that might viably be turned to a game. So we've seen it happen before numerous times over the years.
So they only published it. So I mean,
true, yeah.
Granted, we see. Believe me, that was part of my review. It was like the rainbow of crap was my first warning about this game. But that being said, I mean, it's Real-Time Associates who end up developing this thing.
Who's a very good developer, in their own rights. Right.
Definitely. They have some decent games to their name. Yeah. So I'm kind of surprised that, this was what was turned out. But, to be honest, there are other games like All Real Monsters, Beavis and Butthead, and Skulljaeger, which we covered on here. They're all mediocre, middle of the road. They're not great, but they're not horrible either. So I kind of, felt like I knew what I was getting myself into here.
Yeah. You want to be fair to, Acclaim. It's like the actual, and this is why I think they borrowed elements from both movies, not just one. There is stuff here that can make a fun game. The premise itself is solid enough. The actual plot of the game is every 1,000 years there's a solar, a lunar eclipse. There's a warlock who's able to revive himself during a time period, just like a la Dracula, to gather 6 ancient rune stones that he can use to destroy the earth and kind of rule everything. And so like you play a modern druid, who again, like Castlevania, has inherited powers from your ancestors, to stop the Warlock from doing this. Basically, your plot. So
yeah, it's your Avengers plot.
Yeah,
it's Thanos trying to collect all 6 gems.
So it's like the idea for this is not horrible. I can see what they're going for here. It's like, the actual, and we have seen there's, oftentimes bad movies make for bad games, but there are exceptions where bad movies haven't turned into like pretty good games, actually. Yeah. I think I enjoy, for example, the Punisher game, like the NES as a kid, even though I thought, which I think is better than the movie. I still think that way.
That's not that hard.
Yeah. So, I have gone back and rewatched Punisher more recently, and it's like, okay, there was, I was a bit too harsh on it as a kid, but still not great. I don't think. But
yeah, so. I mean, it's definitely fun for the hour and a half runtime, but that's about it.
But the game is pretty good, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, so. Like I said, Claim LGM had a habit of getting game properties on cheap. So it's like, and like we said, they turned it over to a pretty good developer, Real Time Associates, to do something with it. The game was developed simultaneously like both Genesis and Super NES. There was also a Jaguar version planned also, but that never developed. As I mentioned before in this podcast, Atari had a habit of announcing games that ended up being like total vaporware. So it's really unknown how much, if any, work ever started on a Jaguar version of the game. Yeah. Even if there had been, I don't think they would have done anything more to the game to just like spruce it up a little bit, or take advantage of the 32-bit infrastructure that the Jaguar offered. So this is a moderately late Super NES title, May of '95. So slight spoiler for later on, but I think this is relevant at this point, Joe. Since so I'm going to ask you to talk about the game here in a second. The Super NES version reviewed higher than Genesis version did, even though both games were developed at the same time and fundamentally and basically play the same. We have seen this happen before, where it's like for whatever reason, one console game is just thought of better by the people than the other console's game, even though they are 95% the same game.
Yep.
So, I don't know exactly why. I mean, there are hints for that in reviews we'll talk about here at the end, but it might not surprise you to hear that in this case, Joe, that the Genesis version did not do quite as well.
Yeah. I mean, from what I had seen, it seems like, gameplay is pretty much identical. Some of the set dressing is slightly different. And obviously, if you know anything about the Genesis, they had the GEMS system for sound and music, which is usually bleeps and farts. And, that rarely worked for any games on the Genesis. So I know that's one of the things that this game suffers from is those horrendous bleeps and farts on the Genesis.
So this is actually like one of the rare times on this podcast we're actually getting from both of us completely brand new perspective on a game on a game we've never touched and knew nothing about before we started to dig into it. So Joe, I usually let you go first, so you can go first again here. Your impressions.
So first off, I just want to say, I like the setting. I like the way they set everything up.
The setting's great. Like I said before, the prologue, there's a good setting here to fight the game with, for sure.
Yeah. So you're a sorcerer who's obviously trying to stop the Warlock from collecting all the gems and causing Armageddon. That's the general gist. So you're going to walk through your levels. You're going to face different enemies. I like the fact that you get infinite magic for the most part, so you can just kind of shoot enemies as much as you can.
It's not quite infinite. It's 255, but nobody's going to reach that limit.
Right. And then you also get like this floating orb, which cross-referenced with the movie. In Armageddon, he actually uses telekinesis to be able to levitate a baseball and uses it as a projectile. So that's kind of what they were doing here. Which, cool idea. It was great for grabbing items that are out of reach, but as far as using it as a projectile attack, it barely registers as a hit. So, I mean, that's one of the things I personally think is a negative on this game to begin with, is a lot of the enemies are bullet sponges, as I would say. They take quite a few hits to get them to go away, and that's always a negative in my opinion. But it's even worse with the projectile.
We should probably talk about the 7 spells that you can have in this game here briefly. You have weak and strong smart bombs, which do as the name implies. Healing, which you can use to heal yourself. Revival is a more I never really used revival that much. That's a more powerful heal spell, correct?
Yeah, it is, and I also did not use that.
Protection is another one I didn't use very much. It's kind of like a weak shield to help you out. Tremor can be useful in certain. Tremor can definitely be useful in certain situations. It's kind of like, as the name implies, it's kind of like a longer range earthquake attack. That could definitely be handy for some enemies. And time reversal is a weird one. I'm not sure about the best way to explain how that one works. Do you want to take a shot at it, Joe?
I didn't use that ability.
Okay. It's here. It's like on 7 spells. So it allows you, I used a little bit, as the name implies, it allows you to be able to wind back time a little bit, which can be handy in certain situations. However, there are other factors coming into the gameplay that kind of make this not as useful as it could be, which we'll get here in a minute. But I did want to talk about the spells here briefly.
Yeah, I appreciate you interjecting there. So I guess now's a good time to talk about the big hurdle here. Movement is, I think they were trying to go for something like Prince of Persia, where it's like a cinematic style of movement.
I can see that, sure, yeah.
It just doesn't feel like it was dialed in right. So you're constantly fighting the controls here. Jumps just don't feel right. And ultimately, I just felt like they were just kind of stiff. Another big gripe from me, you cannot attack while you're moving, which, again, sets you up for failure, because you'll have to stand there and take damage while you're dealing out damage yourself, which I always hate when they do that. And you're a sorcerer. I don't understand why you have to stand straight or, whatever. Stand in one place to be able to attack. That just, I don't know, that drives me nuts. The movement thing I kind of got used to by the time I got to the end of this thing. But yeah, it's like, it just felt off. That's the best way to explain it. You would have to play it to understand what I'm saying. For all you out there, I'm sure Greg is nodding his head and knows exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah,
I agree 100%. And the best way I might try to explain it, to add on what Joe was saying, is that the controls feel very delayed. It's like you have it takes it feels like it takes a second or two for your button push to actually matter in terms of the gameplay.
Thank you.
Apparently, from the reviews, it's even worse. It's even worse on the Genesis version, which is like, that is the faster processor. How could that be worse on the system? But apparently, it is for some reason. So, the controls are kind of floaty because of that. And there are all the other drawbacks that Joe just talked about here as far as the controls. Yeah, I agree. The controls are the biggest issue and the biggest negative with this game, unfortunately. But
yeah, the only other negative I would bring up is I felt the levels were repetitive.
I agree with that. Yeah,
so that also grinds on you. It's simple. You get to the end of the level, you encounter the Warlock. He transforms into some animal thing. You basically fend him off. He runs away and continue on in the game until the final fight, which, I mean, yeah, I mean, this I went wholeheartedly into this thing cold. Like Greg said, neither one of us had played this game. I didn't watch reviews, none of that. I just was like, all right, let's play this thing and see what happens. And yeah, this game beat me down, like, to the point where I was just like, I can't wait to record and have this in the review. Spoiler.
Well, I probably did not hate the game quite as much as you did, but I definitely did. I definitely do agree with you that there's a reason this game is like pretty forgotten about these days. Besides the controls, besides the control system, the problems that we had, combat is just not fun in this game for the most part. Partly because of the issue that Joe described, about not being able to move like you're attacking. But the spells are not balanced. Certain spells are used more heavily than other spells. So kind of like defeats the purpose of giving you this repertoire of spells to work off of. I do think the boss fights fighting the stage, we were facing up against the Warlock Transformer are fun.
Yeah,
I definitely, I did have some enjoyment doing those. But beyond that, most of the combat in this game is it's very slow and not reliable and just not very fun at all, unfortunately.
Yeah. And another positive is they do give you a generous password system, and they give you passwords numerous times in a level, which is nice. So.
There's also a password. There's also a password. Not a password. This thing's a good time to mention it. There's also a cheat code you can use that works as both a stage select and also makes you invincible against enemies. Okay. So if you're struggling with this game, just want to get through it, you definitely can use that.
Yeah.
Let me mention my positives to the game here, because we don't want to dogpile in this game totally. Some of the puzzles in the game are pretty good, I thought, actually, because our puzzles you have to go through to figure out how do you do this, where do you have to go next. They're pretty well done, and they fit the theming of the game. The overall theme in the game was pretty good. I mean, the graphics are a mixed bag. I think, the graphics themselves, I think, are very well done. They definitely have a very, spooky / Castlevania vibe to them.
Yeah.
Your character sprite looks pretty good, kind of goofy, but it is but it is defined, so I'll give it that point. The enemies are mixed bag. Some of them are pretty defined, some of them are not. I thought so. Just that. The game screen, just the way that they use the perspective, just kind of felt like forced and squished to me for some reason. So, it just didn't feel this game was as graphically good. It was graphically good as this game is. I just felt the graphics were not as intensive as they could have been. And obviously, they wanted to have this game on both systems, so it's not too violent,
right?
As far as things go. Even though Nintendo was pretty relaxing on their policy at this point, I do understand the whole we got to get the same game out for both systems, so keep the same mentality.
So one of the big differences between these versions is in the Genesis and the final fight with the Warlock. It's like blood dripping down the back of the wall. And
I did not see that. Okay, all right.
And in this one, it is just black. So it's Nintendo's censorship is definitely still there. But you are right. By 95, they kind of let up because they learned their lesson with Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat 2 is up at this point too, right?
Correct.
I think by 95.
95. Yep. So. And I was going to mention it when we got to graphics and sound, but I really like that they took the Wolfenstein / Doom approach to showing damage. You have a face that melts away as you take damage. I thought that was really good. That was the only other thing I had to mention, but I was since you started talking about graphics, I might as well throw it out there.
Well, I'm talking about good things here with the game here, so it's because, honestly, the gameplay of the game is not that deep, but, But so talking about good things of this game, I think is like
So,
okay at this point.
Big props for the title screen.
Title screen's very good. Yes,
the Warlock title with like the flames going up through it. That it was impressive. I thought that was very well done.
Big thumbs down, however, like for the text, it goes by way too slowly. It's like speed up a little bit here for folks here, please. Got a game here to play, but
they want to make sure that every 1,000 years.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, the music of this game I also thought was positive. The most part, I thought this was a good soundtrack. It's very, it kind of sounds spooky. It's not quite as horror inspired as Castlevania music is, but it does kind of feel inspired by the genre of the movie itself and a movie itself. Just how to put you in the mood.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the music was great. Not like, I shouldn't say great. It was good. That's the thing. So, as much as there are negative points for this game, I think there's enough positive stuff to kind of put this I'm just going to throw it out there now. Like, if I had to put a rating on this, like, this would be a 5 out of 10. Mm-hmm. Like, it is middle of the road. It's definitely not something that I would say is complete crap and that you should stay away from, but it's also not going to be the first title I recommend you play on the SNES.
Well, since you mentioned that, this is as good a time as I need to bring it up, because reviews of Super NES game, the Super NES version of the game were very mixed. Mm. Pretty much across the board. Mega Fun gave it 44%. Next Generation gave 2 out of 5 stars. Total gave it 55. 55 they got 100 points. Game Informer, several years later, in 1999, gave it a 3.5 out of 10. So, they would have the weakest review, but they also were looking at it like several years later. Right. And like I said before, this version rated better than the Genesis version of the game. Yeah. So for the most part, I agree with you, Joe. It's like, I think this is a very, I know what they're going for here. I do agree with you. That this game feels very, Wolfenstein / Prince of Persia kind of inspired as far as the actual gameplay. Yeah. I thought the developers did a good job trying to blend in some of the ideas and elements like the movies into the game to make it playable. I can see where some people, like doing research on this, there were some people who thought very positively about this game, and I can see why. Yeah. To a certain kind of gamer, I certainly think, I can see that. I can't hate this game. I can't love it, but I also think I also definitely think there's worse games that we played. Oh yeah. In the history of the podcast. If the control issues were fixed and the combat was made to be more fun, I think this would be like a pretty decent platformer for the system. It wouldn't be anything special, but it would definitely be, solidly thought of when you think of like different platformer games in the system. As it is, Unfortunately, with these issues, I can see why. I can see why this game is pretty much forgotten about, ignored these days. And spoiler, that's reflected upon the prices of this game too, as well. I can really only recommend this game if you are a fan of like obscure platformer games and or games like horror or supernatural elements to them. Because if you enjoy those kind of games and you're willing to put up with the game's flaws, yeah, you can have some fun with this game for sure. Or if you are a fan of the movies, which I'm sure there's got to be somebody out there who's a fan of the movies, because I said before, there are, the movies themselves also got mixed reviews. Right. So, there are people, I'm sure, who enjoyed the movies as well, too. So, yeah, just a certain kind of gamer, I think, would have fun with this game, but everybody else could be like, there's a hard pass. There's much better platformer games on the system for sure.
Yeah, I think if the movement could have been buttoned up a little bit and maybe went for more of a traditional side-scroller kind of feel rather than the Prince of Persia cinematic type of movement, I think this could have been at worst, compared to Castlevania straight, and been a lesser of version, which isn't necessarily a knock on the game, but it was definitely a missed opportunity to kind of button up that could control it. And, you know, like I said, maybe that was their intent, was to go that route, and it just didn't work. That's possible.
I'm sure Acclaim did not give Real-Time Associates a big budget and or time frame to work on this either.
Well, so that was the other thing I was thinking as well.
Because, you know, like I said before, they got the license for cheap, I'm sure, and they're like, well, as long as we make a profit on this, like, who cares?
Right,
but,
right.
I will say one of the positive thing about this game that they're positive. You know, one of the reviewers also mentioned. Remember, we didn't talk about too much difficulty. This game's fairly easy. You know, this would be a good game, I think, for like novice platformers, or people or people who are just looking to cut their teeth on this. As long as you're willing to put up with the control issues we've talked about before, because it's like. The game's not super challenging. It's not super long, even though the playthroughs of this game online range from like hour 20 minutes to 2 hours, depending upon how thorough the person's being. Yeah. So, it could be a good challenge for somebody who's not very good platformer games to kind of help them to ease them into the genre more, so they like to prepare for like bigger and better and harder games of this type. So, I did want to mention that.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts about the overall difficulty, Joe? Like too easy for you, or?
No, I thought it was just right. I didn't really find too much of a challenge, other than obviously, you know, like we mentioned, kind of fighting with the controls. But the game itself, yeah, I found it to be rather kind of breezy.
Yeah. So the enemies also like were also harshly criticized in reviews, like for being being repetitive and bland. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I think they are. They look pretty good, and apparently Super NES has larger enemies than the Genesis version did, because the Genesis version got knocked hard for the small enemies. Yeah. So it does look like it does look like they've got upscaled in Super NES at least. But I can see that. It's a fair argument. This would be a good game for rental, I think. Back in the day, nothing else. Nothing else available. You rent it for the weekend. You have some fun with it. You put it aside. You play never play it again. This would be like a very good weekend rental title for sure. I think. Yeah. So, I guess. I guess one of the reasons that this game's not very well known today, besides being a bad game, is the fact that it's attached to a movie that's also like not like very well known. Yeah. Because a lot of people know about bad games for the system. I mean, like we can name like a dozen of them like right here if we wanted to. But a bad game tied in with a bad movie, not very, maybe bad / unknown, not very unknown movie. Believe me, if this was a very good game, people would have known about it, because, like I said before, there are good games based upon like bad properties. However, when you have the double combination of bad game combined bad / average game combined with bad / average movie, that's the death kiss for any kind of a game like to be known about or talked about, pretty much. Yeah. So,
and I think marketing probably had something to do with it as well, because
sure,
I remember especially in this time frame, being 14 years old, getting my comic books, and there would be advertisements for this game. So I remember the advertisements for the game, but it was literally like it'd be in my comic book. I never saw anything on TV, never saw anything anywhere else, maybe occasionally in a game magazine. But it actually had more marketing than the movies, because I didn't even know the movies existed. I just thought the game was its own kind of thing. So, take that for what it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I mean, like I said before, I'm sure this game did not get a big print run either. So, right. There's also the fact that, this could be a whole other topic for a different time, Joe. But, I think that, during this time period, I don't think that games based upon horror or supernatural properties were as well known of or as well thought of as they are nowadays. I think a lot of people were still kind of hesitant to make anything associated with those properties because because people's memories about the whole D&D satanic cult scare of the 80s was so fresh in their minds, and what Nintendo had been very strict about censorship for a long time. They only by now, yes, they were starting to ease off a bit, but those things linger. So, and we didn't really there was no Resident Evil out yet. There was no, I don't think Clock Tower had even been released yet. Clock Tower never got a U.S. release anyway, so Sweet Home never got a U.S. release. Most of the horror supernatural games stayed in Japan for that reason. So, the market. I'm sure the other factor that didn't help was the fact that the market just was not very receptive to games this type at this time period yet. Right. Had it been released 10 years later on the PlayStation, for example, who knows? I mean, those games, there's a very good chance it still might have been ignored, but I think the elements this game was trying to play into would have been more commonplace, and people looking for them at that time period compared to 1995. Just a thought I had.
Yeah, very true.
But anyway, a bit of a short episode this time around. But like I said before, the gameplay is not really all that deep. So, like I said before, it's just your pretty basic side-scrolling action video game that has some horror supernatural elements to it. So, anything else you want to say before we move on to eBay and wrap things up, Joe, about the game or anything else?
No, I think I've pretty much said my same.
Okay. All right. Well, I did mention the stage select and invincibility code already. So, you do have that out there. Despite the fact the game doesn't sell, this game actually is one of the cheapest SNES games I've seen online in both cart and CIB format. Probably because it is a pretty obscure game. There are copies of it to be had, so it's not so even though I suspect it was a small print run. It does seem to be readily available. 30 copies were listed on eBay as we do research on this. 11 copies of the game had sold recently, so there is some traction for it. But these prices, it may be the cheapest game I've seen for cart only. One of the cheapest cart only prices I've seen for Super NES game. And as always, these prices North American copies, shipping included. Card-only copies of this game sold for anywhere for the pretty low Super NES price of $8 to $20. So that's definitely cheap by Super NES standards.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a single copy of this game which sold CIB recently for $50, which also was pretty reasonable for CIB standards. Yeah. So, not a very hard game to get for your collection. So, it's not often I can say that there's a game here that you can spend more on a fast food lunch than an actual physical Super NES card. But this is one of the rare times. So, and like I said before, if you're the kind of gamer who knows what you're getting into going to this, you get your money's worth out of that.
Absolutely.
For sure, I think so. But anyway. So it was fun checking out a game that we never had heard about. So, and once again, Joe and I form pretty similar opinions, but maybe against something different. I think overall I'm a bit more tolerant for bad things than Joe is, but the two of us definitely were of the same mind as far as our first time impressions like this game. So anyway, I guess that wraps up this one. Next time on the podcast, we have thank God we have a much better game for you. spoiler alert, because of the need to accommodate guest hosts, the guest host we had the podcast, we already recorded that one. So, I can tell you with confidence that the episode turned out very well. So looking forward to look forward to listening to that one next. We're finally getting around to covering Mega Man X. So, again, as a tease with a special guest host who's been on the podcast before in the past. So, stay tuned for that one next. If you have any questions, feedbacks, comments, etc., feel free to leave them on my Facebook page, or you can also send me an email directly to the SNESpodcast@yahoo.com. Joe, you can do your usual plugging here, please.
Absolutely. You can find me on Facebook, because I have a very public Facebook, not family friendly. And you can find me on Twitter at JOESUX30. Alrighty,
sounds good. Okay, so this is kind of our Halloween themed episode. The game of this year, because this episode will drop shortly before Halloween does. So, we picked this game specifically to try to tie into that. There are some of the games coming up that also are going to tie in with certain events. Yep. So, we do that when we can. So stay tuned for that as well. But anyway, As always, we very much appreciate you listening to the podcast. Thank you for giving us some of your time today, and we'll catch you again next time. Stay safe, everybody. Be well. Later, all.
Bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Super power.